Hey, this is Dave from metalepidemic.com. Thank you for checking out our YouTube video. Please feel free to hit the subscribe button below if you like this type of content, and we hope you enjoy the review. What's up guys, Dave here from Metal Epidemic, back with another album review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from Arizona metal band Spirit Adrift. The band's new album, Enlightened In Eternity, will be released on October 16th via Century Media Records and 20 Buck Spin. So, if you're not familiar with Spirit Adrift, they are a two-piece band consisting of Nate Garrett on vocals, bass and guitar, and Marcus Bryant on drums. Nate started this project back in 2015, and since then Spirit Adrift have put out 3 albums and 2 EPs, with album number 4 due to be released on October 16th. Fucking hell, so that's 4 albums and 2 EPs since 2015.
Makes you feel lazy, doesn't it, Dave?
It really does. These guys are not eating, they are not sleeping, they are just writing music and recording music. Jesus. Now, I actually hadn't heard Spirit Adrift's previous album, Divided by Darkness, before checking this new album out. But I do remember the name coming up in quite a lot of like end of year lists last year. But I can't remember why I never checked it out. But now seemed like the perfect time to check it out anyway. And if you go back and if you listen to this band's like back catalogue, it's very clear to hear that they have transformed a bit over the last 5 years. If you go back to the early days, their sound definitely leaned more heavily into the doom side of things.
Probably interesting.
Yeah, probably more in line with like a Pallbearer or Khemmis type vibe. But then last year's Divided in Darkness, I did hear the band swing more towards a kind of traditional, kind of classic heavy metal sound. The doomy tones were still in there, but you could hear more influences like your Judas Priest or your early Metallica, Dio, Black Sabbath starting to come through. It was a far kind of hookier album than its predecessors, both musically and vocally. It certainly had a lot of kind of addictive qualities to it. And it was an album that you could spin and then instantly want to kind of listen to it again. To be honest, I get that same feeling with Enlightened Into Eternity. We mentioned this before the review. Out of all the albums that we've reviewed this week, this is the one that I was least expecting to like. But it's actually the one that I went back to the most out of all the albums we've done. And it was probably the least heavy album out of the batch that we're doing right now as well. But the hooks on this, man, the hooks are so good. It's hard not to be completely pulled in by this release. And on my first couple of listens to this, I put all the praise on the vocals. The melodies and the phrasing is so on point. Nate Garrett can write vocal ear porn. He is fucking very good at writing vocal lyrics and vocal hooks. Vocally, it kind of reminded me of a bit of a mix between a few different people. The Ghost vocalist.
Yep.
It reminded me a bit of John D from The Sword.
Yep.
And then every now and again I would get like a Pete Stahl from Goatsnake similarity in there as well.
Oh, yeah.
Just, kind of between the three of them. He's a very kind of distinctive, kind of yet vintage kind of style to his voice.
I was picking up little waves of, and now his name escapes me, Troy Sanders from Mastodon.
Oh, yeah.
Like later day Troy Sanders though, not like early Mastodon. Like kind of more recent releases. Like ergo like the kind of Era of the Hunter or something like that.
Every track on this album has a vocal hook of some kind. I kept thinking like the next track won't be as catchy as the last one, and every time I was proved wrong. For me, this was a very memorable release, so much so that I don't think I could say which track is the catchiest, to be honest, because they're all so well executed. And I said earlier that I thought the vocals deserved all the praise in this album, but after listening to this over and over, and I have listened to this a lot, I have to say that the music is just as important on this album. The songwriting is excellent. And there's as many hooky riffs as there are vocal lines on this. It's such a span of styles and influences. There are still those kind of more traditional metal vibes that I mentioned earlier, but there's bits of classic rock in there. There's a bit of southern rock in there. There's a bit where they go full on like speed metal. But it still has those kind of doomy undertones as well. And I like that they haven't totally abandoned that part of their sound. And they somehow kind of managed to mix all of this together and make it sound cohesive. Even like these influences are coming from completely different decades, but it kind of shows how good the songwriting is on this release. But I do think that the production deserves a lot of credit as well. It's a very kind of rich and clear sounding production, but also feels a little bit retro at the same time. I think the kind of blend does help with that kind of overall appeal. What did you make of this? What was your thoughts on Spirit Adrift?
So I've been like, for the listeners out there, all I've been getting for the last week is how much Dave's been enjoying this album. I was like, alright, I'll listen to Dave. I mean, it's coming and it's free, alright, I'll give it a listen. Yeah, this is fucking great. I'm kind of with you. I think they have a very approachable sound. I think you don't necessarily, you can be into extreme metal but still dig what these guys are doing, in that they are gearing towards the classics, but the musicality on it I think is instantly appealing. It's difficult not to smile when listening to it. You are right, vocally very impressive, very fucking catchy. It sits just perfect in the mix. Great range. Musically, they have a couple. There's at least 2 songs on here which begin with drum and bass, just the drum and the bass. I love that. I'm a sucker for a song that has a bit of drum and bass working together, and then a guitar riff comes over the top, and then you're off to the races. And they do that at least twice here, and once would have been enough, but twice is even better. Yes, I will have that second slice of cake. You know what I mean? It's a Moorish sounding album. I think that's its key. I think you're right. I think they've not knowing much about their background, there is a retention in the background here of a kind of more stonery sound. But I think what they've done is maybe in line with what, once again, a lot of those bands have done, has made that transition. The Sword is a great example of that. The Sword sound diametrically couldn't be any more different to where they started off, but still sound like the Sword. And yeah, Spirit Adrift just hit you with this is a spin again, spin again, spin again. Very easy to listen to. I went through it twice. I went through it yesterday and then this morning, and it finished. And I felt happy when it finishes as well. It's a very happy sounding album. It's one of those ones where go and listen to it. I challenge you to find something you dislike on here. Yes, you'll be able to liken it to innumerable bands, but they've made it their own. It's really well written. Production is great. Does have a... See what you're saying? It does have a... I thought the guitars sounded retro-y, but the production overall sounded modern. So I know what you're saying. It has that kind of... There's a kind of almost analogy fuzz about it, but it's still very much produced to the point that you can pick out absolutely everything. Every cymbal hit, every bass tone is all in here. It's a great album. I thought when I saw the cover artwork that I was going to be listening to some straight good old fashioned power metal. And Dave, I'm with you on that one. I could not be bothered with that. But then when you were high on it, I then thought, could this be something heavier? And then I couldn't have been any more different when I listened to it. So what I'm saying is I was completely confused about what I was listening to. This is what notes from PR companies are there for that I won't read. But yeah, it's a great album. I can see why they were getting a bit of press last year, because like I say, I don't think you can call yourself a metal fan and not like this album. Yeah. Even at a base level, like it. There's nothing here to dislike at all. And I think it's just shades and levels of like to enjoy to love, just depending on what your position is. But I would be very surprised if I ever heard anyone said they dislike this album, because that's usually a pointer that you're a dickhead. So there we go. It's usually the first sign. It's what I ask people now. Have you listened to listen to this song? What do you think? Oh, you don't like? You're a dickhead. It's going to be part and parcel with inclusion in my will. You have to listen to one of their songs first, and if you don't like it, cut out the will. So I roll. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. No, me too. I think there's a huge amount of different styles going on here, but I think that they transition so seamlessly. You know, so much so that I often got lost in the album, but not in a kind of bad way, because there was always a big chorus or a kind of groove coming around the corner that kind of brought me back on track with the album. For me, it was hard to single out tracks on this release as favourites, because there was so many of them. I think Ride Into the Light is an absolute banger as an opener. It's got everything, you know, it's got drive, it's got groove, it's got varied tempos, big solos, and a chorus that's catchy as hell. But to be honest, when I say that out loud, I could be describing a number of the tracks on this release. I like the kind of southern swagger on Cosmic Conquest,
which is the one I think it's one of the ones that starts off with the bass and the drum. Yeah, I'm sure it does. And you have a friend for life. If you start like musicians out there that are going to be sending, or PR companies are going to be sending things in. If your album has an opener which is just drum and bass, you have a friend in life. Women. The harmonies are another thing that are really good in this album. Harmony of the Sphere and Battle High. The harmonies on those tracks are absolutely tight as hell. Really were. And you know, I went through this album and I was trying to find a flaw. I was trying to find something to dislike. I thought there must be something on here that I could mark as a flaw. And then I thought, maybe you could argue that Stronger Than Pain doesn't have as strong a vocal hook as the other tracks. But then at the same time, the riffs on that track are immense. They drive forward, you know, the little bass drum patterns that sync up with the riffs, and you can't help but be totally hooked in again. I suppose the one track that maybe differs from the rest would be the closing track, Reunited in the Void. It's the longest track on the album at over 10 minutes, and it's probably the most kind of doom-laden track on the release. The riffs are quite lethargic and heavy, but the way the riffs are played in a kind of almost like kind of picking style, they highlight certain strings, and it gives the track a kind of huge dose of melody and epicosity. I'm going to bring that word back again. Nice,
I've used that for a while.
Just dropping it like a fucking dropping it like something that's been dropped.
Epicosity, people. Then when you add in the soaring vocals and a little bit of vintage organ in there as well, I think it's a perfect choice of album closer. I'm really glad they didn't place it in the middle of the album, you know, as the kind of typical breather track, or I think it maybe would have disrupted the flow of the album, so I'm glad they left it to the end. I thought it really worked. I would, like, for their last album, I would probably rate that like a 3.5, maybe a 4 out of 5 if I had more time to listen to it. But this album to me is a complete step up in every way. The more I talk about this album, the more I realise there is nothing I dislike about it. I think everything has its place. I think it flows perfectly. It's varied. It's full of hooks. Production fits like a glove. Songwriting is flawless. I think if you've never heard Spirit Adrift, then you should really check this album out. And if you were a fan of the band before, I don't see how you could be disappointed with this at all. I think it's an absolutely cracking album. Rating wise, I was back and forth on the rating with this one. I really was. I was like, what is it? What? But when it came down to it, and I listened to it again just, you know, a few hours before we recorded this review, and I couldn't find anything to dislike about it. Absolutely nothing. So for that reason, it's getting a 5 from me.
Boom! There you go. And in the tradition of almost every review we've recorded tonight, I'm just a shade lower than you. It's 4.5 from me.
Nice, 4.5. I could live with that. I'd highly recommend this one. If you like any of the styles that were mentioned in this review, then definitely check it out. It comes out on October 16th. It's called Enlightened in Eternity. If you want to check them out online, you can check them out at facebook.com/Spirit Adrift. I'll put a little link in the description below. But yeah, check this one out. Let us know what you think. Put some comments in below. If you like the album, dislike the album, happy to hear your thoughts on it. And thanks again for checking out this review. Much appreciated. We're going to be back with another review very soon. But until then, take care and we'll speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.